Hello everyone! Welcome to another video where I avoid talking about Russia and Ukraine, and instead decided to have a look over at the Guardian's channel to see if there was anything I could laugh at. Well, it turns out the Guardian gods gave me the perfect video called The UK's First Professional Trans Choir. It's a joyful act of resistance. And as someone who has been in choirs in the past, I am interested to see how a trans choir can turn something that is basically just singing, and something that absolutely no person has a problem with, into an act of resistance. So thank you, Guardian. I think we'll get straight into it.
Setting up this choir with people who are trans and non-binary, it's an act of resistance, but it's also joyful.
Well, that's a good start, I suppose. Straight out of the gate, we're reiterating the title, which made me want to go through this and laugh at it. I am going to love how they describe being part of a choir as an act of resistance.
Classical music in general is very gendered and very binary in its processes.
What the hell does that mean? What do you mean classical music is very gendered? And how is classical music very binary? What I think they mean by this is that classical music is structured, which it is. It's all very much based on music theory, with structures such as chords, key signatures, phrases, all complicated stuff like that. All I can think is that because it has these structures and rules, so to speak, that means it's gendered, because genders have gender roles with rules that people generally go by. But this just reminds me of Anita Sarkeesian's everything is sexist, everything is racist rant. It seems like you've got to point out that because music theory has rules and structures, that means it's sexist. But saying sexist is a bit cringed these days, so they tend to say gendered instead.
We're taking up space, we're here to stay, and make sure our voices are heard.
Cool, I don't care. Like, this is what's so weird about politicising something like a choir, especially on such an accepted topic such as trans people. I mean, it's very hard to go around a big city these days without seeing the trans pride flag being flown somewhere, and absolutely no one is taking issue with it publicly. It's like they've gone through the open door and are now bashing on the door frame, saying this is too structured for me. It's just weird, but these people seem to feel really good about that fact, and I have no idea why. Are these people's lives so easy they have to pretend there's problems out there that they're standing against? I don't know. Let's find out. So the video then explains that the two creators of Trans Voices were almost an offshoot of London Contemporary Voices, and they go in a little about their experience there.
My experience with LCP has been very much simultaneous as my journey towards defining my own identity.
So joining this choir has helped this person find their own identity, but not in the sense that, oh, I'm not sure what I'm doing in this world, I guess I might have a talent for singing, let's see if I can identify, let's say, as a singer in some way. But this person doesn't seem to see themselves as a singer. They are saying, oh, I joined them while I was simultaneously trying to find my own identity, which seems to be very much based on what gender they identify as. And given they've got they-them pronouns, they seem to want to define themselves against structural norms, let's say. Which is probably why they wanted to create something new like Trans Voices, because it's not something they had seen before, and they seem to think that it goes against the status quo. Despite the fact that in London, it's just so on board with this trans stuff that I don't know why they'd see that as an act of resistance. I mean, they even have traffic lights that replace the walking green man with trans symbols. I think they're on your side.
Even though the choir and the entire organization and all the people in it have been very kind to me, I still didn't feel like my absolute most authentic self, let's say.
So again, it's a really strange look on identity. It's like they're trying to find a magic bullet where they can say, yes, this thing defines me. Which has never been the case with identity for anyone ever. It's not one thing you can identify yourself with. Your average human identity is a mishmash of many different things. It could include your gender, it could include your nationality. To some people it can even include skin colour, but it's never ever just one thing. And I think it's actually quite rare that your identity is front and centre your superfluous attributes, such as your skin colour, such as your gender or sex, or anything like that. It's usually a lot more to do with your hobbies, your interests, your job even. The things generally that you are good at, and the way you act. But as I say, it seems that Trans Voices was made up by two people who tried to use gender identity to be a magic bullet for their full identity, realise it's not working, and now they need to push that further. Everything about them needs to be about the fact they're trans or gender non-conforming or whatever they say about themselves. And, you know, I'm fine with them trying this, I'm fine with them trying to explore this, but But I think it's very much a postmodern thought that people really think this deeply about their identity. When really, for most people, it's happenstance that comes after they find out what they're interested in. Whereas these people are going backwards. They are having their identity and trying to put their interests around it.
Anil shared a very similar thought and a very similar feeling, and we kind of discussed that realistically what could be happening is that we're probably the only people anywhere on the gender spectrum that's not one end or the other.
And this is what I mean. So the two people who created it obviously found each other through this choir, and they identified with each other because they are both gender non-conforming. They neither see themselves as male or female, or a man or a woman, I should say. So as Coda said, they didn't find themselves being able to identify properly within this choir, so they made their own. My point being, they liked singing, but just being in a choir wasn't enough. It had to be a choir that was specifically for people like them, i.e. people who don't identify their gender with the sex they were born as. And as I say, I'm fine with them trying to do something like this. I just don't think it's actually going to fix their issue. Because their issue simply seems to be their worldview, which is completely wrong. In that the world has to revolve around their identity, rather than their identity being integrated into the world.
We did a Women in Music concert with Under Contemporary Voices at Union Chapel. Reese experienced some really unpleasant transphobic abuse.
So, as is usual with these things, you've made a choir based around your identity, so you don't talk about the songs you do, you don't talk about what you're doing different as a choir, how you're performing these songs. No, you have to talk about how you experience transphobia. You know, it's all about this gender identity. And as is the case with pretty much every example of this, there's never any detail. You just have to go off their word.
When I was outside, I had someone make a really extremely transphobic comment to me, and that person is now removed from the room.
See what I mean? That was it. It's just someone was transphobic to me, they've been removed. I don't know how true that is, but let's just assume it's true. We have no idea what happened there. We have no idea on the details of it. Is a transphobic comment someone making a death threat to you? Or is it someone saying, oh, you actually do look like a woman, well done, and you took that badly? Because it could be either of these things. And this isn't the only example we have of this. I mean, at the Labour conference last year, there was a completely similar episode, which, thank God I got a clip of. I knew it would come in useful someday.
West, when I was transphobically abused in this conference centre by one of our sisters in this conference hall now.
And that was it. That's all the detail you get from that. All it is to shame people. All it seems to ever be used for is a segue to a talking point of, I'm trans, let's talk about me. Oh, guess what? That's exactly what happened here too.
My job as an artist is not to entertain you. My job as an artist is to expand the emotional capacity of my audience.
I absolutely love that. She is basically preaching to the audience saying, look, it's not my job to entertain you, okay? It's my job to give you a load of propaganda you need to swallow up. And if I see any of you looking at me funny, I'm going to take that as transphobia and kick you out of this concert hall. Which, look, at a music concert, if you've got distractions in the audience, I think it's totally fair to kick hecklers out. But honestly, how well do you think you're going to do as an artist if you're not entertaining people and instead trying to be a lecturer? I just can't imagine the entitlement of having people pay to come in a concert hall to then have you tell them that they're evil. But hey, people unironically pay for those things, so well done, London. You continue to be the worst place in Britain.
And I want to emphasise the fact and the need for safe spaces.
There you go, perfect example of what I was talking about. Do we know if this transphobic stuff actually happened? No. If I were to put money on it, I'd say nothing happened, and this was just an excuse for her to go up on stage and say, look, this is why we need trans safe spaces. Because she just admits on stage there, look, I'm not here to be an entertainer, I'm here to push my agenda. I mean, if she's going to say to people who have paid to see her to say that, I don't think it's that much of a stretch to say, yeah, she'd lie too.
I was kind of supporting that and watching it, and it was just this thing of like, I've been living with this, and I haven't been living my truth fully.
Again, the example of backward thinking. I've been living as a trans/non-binary person, but I don't feel it's authentic or truthful, as this person says, because not everything is entirely tied to their identity that they do in their everyday life. And it's just weird to me you demand that of society, but this is the modern world.
One of the reasons we set up Trans Voices was to address the lack of representation in music.
Not to sound like a broken record, but this is exactly what I mean. There isn't enough in the world about my identity with the things I like, therefore I have to make it all about me.
Our first task for the choir is to co-create songs for our performance at Union Chapel. So this music is made in the moment, and it's using improvisation techniques we've come up with ourselves to explore our voices and connect with each other.
Again, this is the part I have nothing against. At least they're finally talking about music here. But it appears I was correct at the start, where they don't seem to like the fact that classical music has structures, chords and all that. And this is more of a just, we'll throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And they don't seem to realise music theory is literally that done over centuries, and that is what has stuck.
It's amazing to hear our voices filling it up, and it just feels like more and more we're reclaiming it.
I've cut out the pure singing parts, but I mean, take my word for it, it actually doesn't sound that bad. But the phrasing there is really weird. This person said, oh, I love the voices filling up the room in this church, it feels like we're reclaiming it. Now, I don't know what is meant by reclaim, especially. I don't know what is meant by it, but it does sound pretty good, yes. I really hope that this person goes into what they mean.
Making stuff together is beautiful, and trans voices making stuff together is, I think, even more beautiful.
I mean, this is just Douglas Murray's The Step After Equality is We're Better Than You. The example he puts in his book Madness of Crowds, I think, is to do with the gays. Where it was originally, oh, same-sex couples can be just as good parents as opposite-sex couples. And not even 2 years later, you then had activists coming out saying, actually, from these studies that we're going to cherry-pick, it seems that same-sex parents are better than opposite-sex parents. And I'm not particularly surprised that a trans person said something like this. And I mean, hell, it's their own subjective opinion. I just don't think they're basing that opinion purely on the music.
Coming out as non-binary and living truly or freely.
Again, the language, this person says that they finally feel good that they're living truly or freely. And it's just weird to say, oh, I'm free as a non-binary person, oh, but at the same time, if I'm part of a trans choir, I'm part of a resistance, which, to be fair, this person didn't say that, but that's how the choir is being framed. It's a joyful act of resistance. But the whole idea of being part of a resistance is that you're not free. So the words are all over the place.
Is that you start to really see how gendered the rest of the world is. Part of the reason I thought it was important to not just be out personally, but be out professionally is because I'm desperate to change that.
I mean, this is the unfortunate thing. You're not going to change that because gender is rooted in biology. There are social aspects to gender roles, obviously, but basically up until Clown Decade, it was never really questioned that gender had nothing to do with biology. That was just so obviously wrong, but now, again, as Douglas Murray says, it seems that things we knew for centuries have been thrown out the window, and things we have found out today seem to be the mainstream opinion here, and this is the case here. Oh, the rest of the world's gendered, which I don't agree with necessarily. I don't exactly see how classical music is gendered, beyond most of the composers were male. But they were working within the rules of music theory and trying to experiment with them. That's not gendered because absolutely anyone can do that.
That traditional voice separation of sopranos, altos, tenors, and basses, for the first time I experienced it when I was maybe 6 or 7, because I used to sing in a children's choir.
So I have a bit of an issue there. I was also in children's choirs, and there was no separation when you were that young, because men's voices haven't dropped, so all the kids have basically the same range, and in fact can even go higher to falsetto, which is generally what little boys sing because their voices can go extremely high. But then in secondary school I didn't join the choir for a few years, and I only joined when my voice started to drop. And then, believe it or not, trust me, I don't know how it happened either, but I was put in the bass section. So that was maybe beyond the age of 11, so I basically don't think this person got that detail right. But this is what's so weird. The altos and sopranos being women, and the tenors and basses, baritones, being men, they are basically pushing forward the idea that that happened to segregate genders. Which doesn't make sense, because then why would you segregate them even more between tenor and basses, and sopranos and altos, if it's just based on gender? Why not just put all the women and all the men together? It's because that's complete bollocks. The reason it's done is for the same reason you segregate instruments in an orchestra. It's to get the instruments, or in the choir's case, voices, together in sections where they will be singing the same thing so they can hear each other, and to help with acoustics. But it's not based on gender as is being pushed forward here. And I wouldn't be surprised in this trans choir if they do segregate, which to be honest I'd be surprised if they do, but if they were to segregate, you'd probably find that the people who were born male are probably tenors and basses, and the people born female probably on the alto and soprano side, but that obviously is entirely dependent on how far through hormone replacement therapy they've gone and how much voice coaching they've had. But what I am saying here is that biology clearly has some sort of influence here.
And I was an alto at the time before my voice broke as I went through first puberty.
Boom, there you go, and the same thing probably would have happened with me if I joined the secondary school choir straight away. And in fact, thinking back on it, I'm pretty sure some 11 and 12-year-old boys did end up in the alto section till they, well, as he said, till his voices dropped. So there you go, the whole, oh, music is gendered line has been debunked.
I was trained more on a scale where it was more appropriate for someone who was male, and I remember a singing teacher was always saying go lower, and that was quite triggering.
See, this is really weird to me as well, because I remember on my first or second time going to choir in secondary school, my friends were like, because it's my voice, and you know, as it has been described many times, it's soft voiced, it's low T and all this. My friends who were already in the choir were saying, yeah, you're probably a tenor, go with the tenors. But there was a problem because I couldn't really get above middle C, which is what tenors had to do. And so I had a similar experience here where the music teacher was, okay, let's see what your scale is. And they got to about middle C or whatever it was. And then they went one higher to D. And nope, my voice just couldn't do it. And they're all saying, go higher. And I start going louder instead, hoping that it'll push my voice up. But they're like, no, higher, not louder. And I'm like, yeah, I know that. I just can't go any higher. But I don't get how that would be triggering for anyone, really. I guess I have to make a lot of assumptions for this person. I guess they're a trans woman, and they were originally a man. So obviously you're going to assume that they're going to have the range of a man, somewhere between bass and tenor. And maybe that then didn't happen, and they just couldn't do it for some reason. So maybe they would have preferred being an alto. And I have no idea if this played into her idea that she needs to transition or anything like that. But it's just so weird to hear someone say, yeah, I struggled in a couple of singing lessons and that was triggering. Like, this is probably why they think it's an act of resistance. It's to get back at this music teacher that was like, go lower, but you couldn't. Just, it doesn't matter. Just go alto. It really doesn't matter.
It's so strange to have such gendered expectations of music when, if you look at the history of opera, it is essentially high art gender fuckery, you know? And I don't really understand why people don't lean into that more.
What in God's name do you mean by that? The history of opera is high-class gender effery. I mean, genuinely, I don't know what is meant by that. I can't think off the top of my head anything close to gender effery that comes from opera. I need an example here. Please tell me you've got one.
I'm really excited about being in the same room with other trans singers and musicians and the opportunity to create a community.
No, nothing. It just moved on. Thanks, that's really helpful and insightful. You've made an assertion that... I mean, look, I did music GCSE. I went to quite a few music concerts when I was younger. I just don't remember any opera having any gender effery. But no, now we're just going on to talk about how, as I said at the beginning, the whole idea of this choir was to bring trans people to the forefront, which is fine if that's what they want to do. I just don't think that's necessarily going to make good music. But hey, experiment away, your singing voices genuinely weren't that bad before.
I consider my true voice to be quite androgynous. I guess hard for people to place on the traditional gender binary.
I mean, you might say that to yourself, but I'm not being funny. And I'm sure the rest of my audience have made an assumption of your sex based on your voice. But again, this is my biggest issue with this whole video. Their voices, their music, it doesn't seem that bad. The fact they've made a choir, completely fine. I've got nothing against that. Even one that's only inclusive to trans people, totally fine with that. The issue is that they've made their identity the whole focus rather than the music. You know, you're making a choir. It's supposed to be for the music. But no, all these people can seem to talk about is their issues with identity. And so it just seems like they're overcompensating, saying, oh, this is what well, they think the modern world expects of us. That this is, you know, these gender roles, now we're going to get rid of them. Oh, I want more opera gender referee. Yeah, that's all well and good, and yeah, sure, build that community, I'm fine with it. But you got to realise how obnoxious it's going to be to the normal person when you come up on stage and start preaching to them about trans safe spaces, and then have everything about this choir that you talk about be just about gender and your identity. I suppose this is what we get when we end up pushing for people to be narcissistic.
I used to experience a lot of dysphoria around it, and sometimes still do. Gender dysphoria is when a person's gender identity and the sex that they were assigned at birth are in conflict with each other.
Oh, I hate it. They use the assigned at birth line. No, the doctors see your genitals and they go, yep, that's definitely male, yep, that's definitely female. You are deemed to be of that sex. It just so happens that over 99% of the time, you end up naturally feeling you're within that gender role anyway. And then, as you say, yes, when you have gender dysphoria, that is where that feeling goes skew with.
And so I think with singing, you have this interplay between your singing voice, but then also something so fundamental to your identity as your gender.
I must have listened through that about 10 times now, and I still don't understand what is being said. As far as I can tell, what was said was that with singing, there is an interplay between a person's singing voice and the gender they identify as. I'm not going to lie, I mean, I sung for well over a decade at school. I never got that feeling, ever. I just enjoyed the performance. This is probably why I enjoy doing YouTube so much. This is mostly a performance, and I enjoy entertaining people. But at no point have I gone, yes, it must be because all of those gender roles as well, there's an interplay there with my singing voice. Nah, dude, I just really enjoyed singing Oklahoma.
The sound that I make is inherently tied to my physical self.
Again, I don't think a singing voice is that deep. But I guess on this matter it's very subjective anyway, so it's not much to criticise there. I just think it's a weird thing to say.
My body makes my sound, and I love that sound. And I think that sound to me is worth anything difficult that might be brought up.
Great. Again, literally no idea what you're talking about. Because I cut a bit out where she's talking about her transitioning and how sometimes she still has days of gender dysphoria that are worse than others. So I guess she's saying that her voice is the one thing about her body that basically keeps her grounded in her identity. But even that's a bit weird, because pretty much every trans person I know has gone through some sort of voice coaching. And I have no idea if this person has or not. But the whole idea of singing is that you are changing your voice, so I don't know. It's just a really weird thing to put your entire focus of your identity on. But hey, I guess it's an interesting insight. So I'm skipping quite a bit of the video now because most of the rest of it seems to just be the actual concert they have at Union Chapel, which isn't really a concert, it's more just a music video, is the best way I can put it. But I wasn't joking when I said they are way, way more about the trans identity than they are about the music. Because it's not that the music's bad necessarily, it's just, I mean, it can only be explained by showing you.
We're beautiful, stolen, reclaim, we're beautiful, stolen, reclaim.
For those who can't tell properly, they are saying queer, beautiful, stolen, reclaim, reclaim. Again, what they're reclaiming, I have no idea. Queer, that's obvious. They're trans. Beautiful, I guess that's our own opinion. Stolen, literally no idea what they're on about. But as I was saying from the start, this whole trans voices choir thing seems to just be there to push an agenda, which they are perfectly free to do. It's just when you focus on that more than the music, you're going to annoy a lot of people and probably not be that successful. But, you know, if they just want to push agendas, whatever, that's up to them.
What is the purpose of denying our existence?
See what I mean? Full propaganda. No one denies your existence, and I don't even think you know what that means.
My voice has the power to tear down civilizations.
Again, the whole Douglas Murray pipeline of talking about being equal to them being better. At first it's just, oh, trans voices are being silenced, we need to speak out to protect our interests and things like that. And now it's just turned into, now our voices can tear down civilizations. I could make some really spicy jokes here, but I think I'll just Rorschach test and let you, the audience, decide what I was going to joke about when it comes to fighting to tear down civilizations and trans people.
I'm here to reclaim everything.
What did you have, dude? What are you reclaiming?
Queer, beautiful, stolen. If they will not let us in their cities, we will build new ones.
Oh, well, that was easy. So you're not reclaiming anything at all. Instead, if this thing which has been taken from you won't be given to you back voluntarily, you're going to go away and build something else anyway. What weird lyrics. This was the only part I wanted to go through, but the whole song's like this. But that part was the most nonsensical part, and they spent time writing that. I'm sorry, I said that was going to be the last of it, but man, these lyrics just get worse.
Mirrors are not the only things that can show you what you look like.
I don't even know what that means. I mean, to be fair to this choir, yeah, their singing's pretty good. The tune itself, pretty good. The lyrics are absolutely nonsensical. But I didn't expect anything better when they were quite clear that this was just a choir to push an agenda.
In a way, the most important thing for me was finding a group of people who I could sing with who were like me, because I never sing in rooms with people who are like me.
And this is what I absolutely love. They will constantly complain about trans representation, saying, oh, in the music industry there aren't enough trans people, and then they'll self-segregate, they'll push themselves out, and then blame the music industry for that. Like, how does that make any sense?
This project is about coming together as a community and creating our own narrative.
Yes, thank you. I realised that from your lyrics and from the fact that for some reason you couldn't hack being in a general community choir. But hey, I hope you realise that if you have a choir, the music should be more important than the agenda you're pushing.
And allowing us to be the storytellers rather than it always be looked at from the outside.
I mean, look, hey, you know, that's fair, but then when in your songs you're saying we're going to tear down civilizations and completely leave society, then all you're going to be able to have is voices from the outside within these places. You're not trying to integrate, you're trying to self-segregate, and then complain at the rest of the world because you self-segregated. It's really dumb. But I'm not surprised that the Guardians push something like this, because the Guardian are stupid.
It just feels like such a safe and special space. I feel very free in this space, really free.
So this is the last thing said in this video, and you know what she said, I've not really got anything against it. I'm not really against people making things where other people are going to feel more comfortable. But the main problem I obviously have is that when there are companies that are incredibly inclusive, let's say for example the BBC or something like that, and generally they don't one-for-one represent the whole of the UK, they then whinge and moan about it, and then self-segregate anyway. That's what annoys me most about this. And then when they finish, they make a mediocre song that is doing nothing but trying to push their agenda, or as they say, quote-unquote, tell their story. But I wouldn't be surprised if any trans people in my audience are getting annoyed at these people through what they're saying here. But I have no doubt that those people in my audience are going to leave me wonderful comments, maybe expanding on some points I've made. But hey, it's been a very slow news month, given that Russia decided to invade the Ukraine. And that is a subject I'm avoiding because I think basically everything coming out of that is pure propaganda. So this is the best I got to do for now. But anyway, that's all I had for you today. So as usual, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.